Eternatus is a pretty interesting Pokemon. He's the tallest Pokemon of all time and is one of my favorite Pokemon from Generation 8, right after Centiskorch, Capparaja, and Galarian Linoon. Something interesting about Eternatus is that he's not native to this planet, instead hailing from the stars above. This has caused a lot of people to wonder whether or not Eternatus is an Ultra Beast, which is the question we're going to try and answer today. But before we get into the topic of whether or not he's an Ultra Beast, we have to take a step back and talk about the other Ultra Beasts first. The Ultra Beasts are a group of extraterrestrial Pokemon introduced in the Generation 7 games. Most of them have very exaggerated over-the-top design, something that was done in order to make them stand out from all the other Pokemon. Ultra Beasts are based on all sorts of things, such as jellyfish, bugs, electrical wires, bugs, whatever the heck this thing is, and whatever the heck this thing is! All jokes aside, while their physical appearances may be very extreme, each one of the original Ultra Beasts embody one of the 7 deadly sins. We'll start off with Nihilego. The Pokemon gets its name from combining the Latin words Nihil and Ego, which translate to nothing and I respectively. When we put these words together, we get I am nothing. This is reflected very well in the Pokemon's design. If we take a look at Nihilego's umbrella, we can see that it's translucent. It shows us that the inside is physically empty. The Pokemon lacks both the face and the brain, as well as any other internal features. Something interesting that I noticed while doing research for this video is that in one of the Pokédex entries, Nihilego is observed acting like a little girl. If we take a look at the Pokemon's design from the side, its tentacles strangely resemble that of a young girl's hair, and the umbrella a sun hat. It's no surprise then that this Pokemon represents the sin of envy, desperately desiring to be something it can never truly be. This is very well showcased in the original Sun and Moon games, where Nihilego fuses with the character Lusamine and injects her with a neurotoxin, allowing Nihilego to control her. The sins that the other Ultra Beasts are based on are as follows. Buzzwole is based on wrath, Formosa is based on lust, Xurkitree is based on greed, Cortana is based on pride, Celesteela is based on sloth, and Guzzlord is based on gluttony. In addition to this, Xurkitree may be based on a Christmas tree, as the star on his head strongly resembles a Moravian star, which is commonly used as a decoration during Christmas time in the Moravian church. These are all pretty reasonable explanations for the original Ultra Beast, but we seemingly run into some problems when we encounter the 4 new Ultra Beasts that were introduced in Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. At a glance, these Pokemon all seem to be based on non-biblical entities. Blacephalon is based on clowns and fireworks, Takataka comes from a Japanese yokai, and Poipole is purple. However, if we dig a little deeper, we can see that these Pokemon still carry some biblical undertones with them. First, we have Blacephalon, who very well may be based on the lesser-known 8th deadly sin, known as despair. The sin doesn't condemn feeling sad or depressed, it mostly entails turning away from God because of a deep feeling of hopelessness brought on by anxious and depressive thoughts. Despair often goes hand in hand with suicide, which gives this theory more credence as Blacephalon's signature move is Mind Blow, which involves a Pokemon taking his head off and blowing it up. My explanation for Stakataka is a little more nuanced. I think that he could be based on the story of the Tower of Babel. According to the Book of Genesis, all of humanity came together to build a tower to reach God in heaven, but they were ultimately foiled when God divided their language so that they couldn't communicate with one another. The fact that he's made up of so many different sentient tiles could be a parallel to all of man working in unison with one another to build the tower. With Poipole and its evolution Naganadel, there's no biblical story or teaching I can relate the Pokemon's design to. Although the colors of Poipole in its shiny form are purple, gold, and white, the latter representing purity and the former colors royalty. Poipole is also based on a bee, which not only happens to be associated with purity in Catholicism, but also the Virgin Mary, who happens to be the Queen of Heaven. As it happens, the Poipole species is genderless, and also happens to be the only Ultra Beast species you encounter that isn't hostile towards you, noted as being a common starter on the world it's from. This could indicate that Poipole is symbolic to that of angels and their purity, holiness, and service to man under God's rule. It's possible that they could even represent guardian angels, given how close they are to humans, although traditionally you don't have dominion over your guardian angel and aren't able to ascribe names to them. Now that we have all this out of the way, I can hear some people saying that I made a mistake by saying that Poipole is the only Ultra Beast that doesn't act hostile to you, as Cosmog acts friendly to you throughout the duration of the game. Unfortunately, Cosmog and its evolutions aren't considered Ultra Beasts. While there are some overlapping qualities they share with them, which we'll get to later, they've never been considered Ultra Beasts in any extension of the Pokemon world. In spite of this, however, both Solgaleo and Lunala have some significant biblical qualities to them, with Solgaleo's easily being the most pronounced. His design is based on that of a lion, an animal closely associated with Jesus and nobility in Christianity. He also possesses a white body with gold highlights, which as we mentioned before are symbolic of purity and again, nobility. In contrast to this, Lunala is based on a bat, a creature that doesn't hold a lot of symbolic meaning in the religion outside of being considered an unclean animal in the Old Testament. Regardless of this, there's still a lot about Lunala to pick apart here. You see, when the Pokemon uses its signature move Moongeist Beam, it will enter into a special form known as the Full Moon form. While Lunala is in this form, its wings curl upwards to create a circle, and the third eye opens up on the Pokemon's forehead. This form could possibly be a reference to the Ophanum class of angel that are mentioned in the Bible. These angels are described as having multiple eyes on their bodies, which are comprised of multiple rings rotating around one another. In addition to this, Solgaleo may be based on the cherub, the next rank of angel above the Ophanum class. According to scripture, the cherub has 4 distinct heads, one of which happens to be a lion, while the others are that of a man, an ox, and an eagle. On top of all this, Solgaleo has a steel typing and Lunala has a ghost typing, which could be a reference to how angels are purely spiritual beings that are also able to take on a physical form. Solgaleo and Lunala are also part of an unofficial trio of legendary Pokemon. The third Pokemon in this trio is Necrozma, who, similar to Solgaleo and Lunala, is not an Ultra Beast, but still has a lot of religious symbology associated with him. There are a lot of parallels between the Pokemon Necrozma and Lucifer, the devil in Christianity. According to the Pokemon lore, Necrozma was greatly injured after the inhabitants of Ultra Megalopolis, a human city located in Ultra Space, tried to gain control of the creature in order to recreate the light energy that's contained in its body. This unfortunately crippled Necrozma, leaving him in a severely weakened, dulled-out black body. While he's in this form, he suffers constant pain, which explains his aggressive nature. Necrozma would later return to the city, attempting to steal the light that they had created for himself. He succeeded in stealing the light, causing Ultra Megalopolis to be shrouded in darkness, but was unsuccessful in returning to his original form. He would eventually make his way to the Alola region in an attempt to steal the light from the islands, but he ended up being defeated by a group of legendary Pokemon known as the Guardian Deities, who fought alongside a young trainer. Concerning the Christian devil, however, his story is a little different. Lucifer, along with a third of all the angels, led an assault on God's kingdom, known as the War in Heaven, which resulted in Lucifer being cast out of heaven down to the earth. And there was a great battle in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon fought in his angels. And they prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And that great dragon was cast out, that old serpent, who is called the devil and Satan, who seduceth the whole world. And he was cast unto the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. While their origins may not line up perfectly, there's still more than a few similarities between them, especially physically. In Necrozma's Ultra form, aka his true form, we can see that he has a head resembling that of an 8-point star, as well as a total of 6 separate wings surrounding his body. While the shape of his head might be a reference to the title Morning Star, one that is commonly attributed to the devil, the 6 wings on his body could very well be a reference to the Seraphim, the highest ranking class of angel in the hierarchy of angels. This is the class of angel that the devil is traditionally believed to have been before his fall from grace. The Hebrew word Seraph translates as burning, which describes Ultra Necrozma perfectly, having been described as exceeding heats of over 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The word Seraph is also used in the Old Testament multiple times to refer to serpents, which is interesting given that the devil took on the form of a serpent in the early chapters of Genesis while attempting to deceive Adam and Eve. While we're on the topic of the devil, the word Lucifer is translated from the Hebrew word Halel, which means shining one. Similarly, Necrozma is referred to in-game as the blinding one. Lucifer itself also means light bearer, which describes Necrozma's true form perfectly. The fact that Necrozma's weakened form is that of a prism could harken back to how the devil's original purpose was to reflect God's glory, as prisms are known for perfectly reflecting any no light that passes through them. The fact that his body is a black prism, however, could also be a reference to how the devil is no longer capable of performing this task, as he not only chose to betray God and forsake heaven, all to pursue his prideful ambition. With Necrozma out of the way, this wraps up all of the Pokemon surrounding the Ultra Beast prior to the release of Generation 8. While there are other Pokemon that have been noted as having extraterrestrial origins, they aren't related to the Ultra Beasts in any meaningful way. This brings us to Eternatus, who is already pretty similar to the Ultra Beasts. He's from a different world, he has an over-the-top distinctive design, and on top of all this, he has a very unique level-up pattern. You see, when it comes to the Ultra Beasts, they all have the same level-up pattern. They all learn their first move at level 7, and then continue to learn a new move roughly every 6 levels afterwards. This pattern is the same for all the Ultra Beasts, and is very similar for Solgaleo, Lunala, and Necrozma. With Eternatus, however, he learns his first move at level 8, then another one every 8 levels until he reaches level 88. While he does share a strange level-up scheme with the Ultra Beast, it's not enough to cement him as one yet. Something that would give us a more concrete idea on whether or not he's an Ultra Beast would be if he holds any meaningful religious symbolism, whether it be in his design or in his nature. As the story of Eternatus goes, he arrived on the planet 20,000 years ago after crashing down to Earth inside a meteorite. This could be an obvious parallel to the devil being cast out of heaven, but another interesting comparison I found is in Eternatus' shiny form. If you take a look at his shiny form, you'll see that he goes from having these dark blue, purplish scales to having bright burgundy ones. This very well could be a parallel to the red dragon from the Book of Revelation, who is noted as having 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon its head. If we look at Eternatus' Eternamax form, we can see that his 5 heads, yes, these are heads, all have multiple horns on top of them. On top of this, we can see a collection of spikes above the coiled body, which resembles that of a crude crown. While we're on the topic of Revelation, we should probably bring up the Darkest Day, an event in Pokemon that is closely associated with Eternatus. Around 3,000 years ago, Eternatus tried to absorb all of the energy in the Galar region, which caused an event called the Darkest Day. A black storm covered the region and resulted in numerous Pokemon Dynamaxing and Gigantamaxing, causing them to grow to an enormous size and wreak havoc all across Galar. The event was eventually stopped by 2 Pokemon and their trainers, but what's interesting is that there are some extensive parallels to the Book of Revelation, not only through Eternatus, but also other Pokemon in the Galar region. In the Book of Revelation, there are a collection of figures known as the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, who are known for bringing about conquest, war, famine, and death in the last days. Funnily enough, there are 2 legendary Pokemon native to Galar that happen to be based on horses. One is a white horse, one is a black horse, and one has a shiny form where he becomes red. While Glastaria's shiny form doesn't match that of a pale horse, that being a sickly horse with a yellowish-green disposition, there is another Pokemon that somewhat matches that description, that being the shiny form of Galarian Rapidash. Eternatus' name is also something worth mentioning. The first half makes sense, it's the word eternity, meaning forever, but the second part of his name is a little more interesting. It's possible that it comes from the Latin word Eternatus, the transliteration of the Greek word Thanatos, which means death. This would make Eternatus' full name Eternal Death, which is not only the fate of the devil, but all those who accept the mark of the beast in Revelation. While we could just stop here and say that he represents the devil, that wouldn't make much sense since that spot is already taken by Necrozma. There has to be another meaning here. It wouldn't make sense for them to reuse the devil again in a fashion like this. Thankfully, I think there is another meaning here, but in order to look at that, we first have to take a look at the box legendaries from this generation, Zacian and Zamazenta. While the box legendaries in this generation may not look like they have any relation to Christianity, it's worth noting that Zacian is able to learn a move called Behemoth Blade, and that Zamazenta is able to learn a move called Behemoth Bash. The behemoth is mentioned in the Book of Job as being a massive land animal, shown to the protagonist Job as a representation of God's power. While the fairy typing could simply be referencing the mythical nature of the behemoth, the steel typing may have a deeper meaning outside of them wielding a sword and a shield. If we take a look at the Book of Job, we'll come across this verse concerning the behemoth. His bones are like pipes of brass, his gristle like plates of iron. Then, later on in the same chapter, we get this verse. He sleepeth under the shadow in the covert of the reed and in moist places. The shades cover his shadow, the willows of the brook shall compass him about. This vaguely describes slumbering well, the area in which the duo is found in the games. If Zacian and Zamazenta represent the behemoth, then it would make perfect sense for Eternatus to represent the Leviathan, the behemoth's counterpart in the Bible. The description of the beast is as follows. Canst thou draw out the Leviathan with a hook, or canst thou tie his tongue with a cord? Canst thou put a ring in his nose, or bore through his jaw with a buckle? Will he make many supplications to thee, or speak soft words to thee? Will he make a covenant with thee, and wilt thou take him to be a servant forever? Shalt thou play with him as with a bird, or tie him up for thy handmaids? Shall friends cut him in pieces? Shall merchants divide him? Wilt thou fill nets with his skin, and the cabins of fishes with his head? Lay thy hand upon him, remember the battle, and speak no more. Behold, his hope shall fail him, and in the sight of all he shall be cast down. The next chapter goes further in depth about the Leviathan. I won't quote it all here, but there were a few verses that caught my eye. First, we have a description of the Leviathan's body, which matches up pretty well with Eternatus. Who can open the doors of his face? His teeth are terrible round about. His body is like molten shield, shut close up with scales pressing upon one another. One is joined to another, and not so much as any air can come between them. They stick to one another, and they hold one another fast, and shall not be separated. While the part about no air passing through his body isn't quite true for his regular form, it is for his Eternamax form, where the Pokemon's core is now protected by his coiled body. There are subsequent verses describing the Leviathan's eyes as that of the Islands of Morning, as well as how he breathes forth fire, but a verse that ties this all together can be found right at the end of the chapter. He beholdeth every high thing. He is king over all the children of pride. This verse, along with a few other details, have led some to believe that the Leviathan represents the devil himself. The battle mentioned in one of the earlier verses I read could refer to the war in heaven, where at the end the devil is ultimately cast out down onto the earth. This easily explains all of the similarities Eternatus shares with the devil while still maintaining his symbolic individuality and representing another biblical element. Even though neither of his two forms perfectly embody the Leviathan visually, you have to remember that Pokemon like this are often designed with multiple different inspirations in mind. Remember Solgaleo and Lunala from earlier? Not only can they both represent different classes of angels, they also represent different creatures relating to alchemy. Heck, the two Pokemon that were already based on the Leviathan and the Behemoth bear very little resemblance to their biblical counterparts. Don't even get me started on Rayquaza, okay? This guy was based on a mythical creature called Ziz, who looks like this. How the heck do you get this from this? In conclusion, I think that there's more than enough evidence that constitutes Eternatus being an Ultra Beast. He has an over-the-top design, an extraterrestrial origin, a patterned level-up scheme, and finally, holds a deep religious symbolism that bridges the gap between him being just a standard legendary Pokemon to being an Ultra Beast. I hope you guys enjoyed watching the video. It's definitely a lot different from my other videos, but I enjoyed the making of it a lot. I'm not that good at doing these outros, so I'll just show you guys a photo of my cat. This is me and my cat Zelda, and then this is me and my cat Zelda if we were Pokemon. Yep. That's how I'm ending this thing.